Write this down. Because when I'm probably 80 years old, I'll win a Nobel Peace Prize for this one. We all have three pathways through which we express our emotions. Why do we express emotions? What was that? To communicate, to release. We express our emotions for those very reasons. Underneath that is to transition and adjust. We express emotions to adjust from one thing to the next, to make the transition from the watching the television to take the trash out. That is an emotional adjustment. That's why we express our emotions. Moment to moment, we are always making an adjustment. Every time you ask me a question, I am having to make an emotional adjustment. If I ask you a question, you're making an emotional adjustment. We get ready to go to lunch. When we take a break, you're going to make an emotional adjustment. And let me tell you how it's going to look. I'm going to say, let's take a break. And you're going to go, and then you're going to stand up slowly. And then you're going to stretch. And then you're going to say, that's pretty good stuff. That's pretty good stuff. Yeah, let's go in here and take a little break. All of that is adjusting and transitioning to be able to go take a break. Now let me ask you this. What if I said, let's go take a break, and you went, and I said, don't give me that attitude. And you got up slowly, and I said, don't move so slow. Move a little faster. Hurry, we got to break, we got to break, we got to break. Would you start to feel a little stressed? Yeah, you would, right? How many of us as children, was it okay to roll your eyes and huff and puff when your parents asked you to do something? It wasn't, right? Don't give me that attitude. Don't roll your eyes at me. I will knock your eyes into the back of your head. You just do what I say to do. Quickly. Attitudes were not okay. But attitudes are a pathway through which we express emotion. What is an emotion? An emotion is energy in motion. That's all it is. Energy in motion. That is all emotion is energy in motion. So it's energy transitioning through your body. An attitude is an emotional expression. So when you rolled your eyes, you were actually expressing energy. But how have we grown and been conditioned to believe that state, what that behavior is really about? What have we been led to believe? What have we been conditioned to believe that rolling eyes is really about? Disrespect, right? And as soon as we sense disrespect, what does that do to our brain? Woo! Our amygdala senses it as a threat. Remember, your amygdala doesn't think. It's all emotional. So it's always just scanning, looking for a threat, looking for a threat. And as soon as it sees one, cortisol, cortisol, cortisol. And then what do you say? You say, don't roll your eyes at me. Don't give me that attitude. Because you perceive it as a threat. Well, here's where the more of the kind of the brainwashing and the miscommunication has occurred. Is now we've been led to believe that if I don't get you to stop rolling your eyes, I'm a bad parent, and you're never going to be able to hold down a job when you become an adult. So now it just got serious. I'm a bad parent. You're not going to be able to hold down a job. Stop rolling them freaking eyes at me. I'm doing you a favor. I'm going to knock them into the back of your head. Attitude is not okay. But it's just an energy transfer. It has nothing to do with you. When I roll my eyes and when I go, it really has nothing to do with you. And you take it so personally. We get so stressed out over an attitude. Oh my gosh, it just hurts our heart, doesn't it? Your kid rolls your eyes, you're like, oh God, stop rolling your eyes. Why? Why is it so serious? Well, so we can't express through attitudes. Guess what's next? Feelings. For how many of you was it okay to say to your parents, I hate you. This food sucks. You're stupid. You're the dumbest parent ever. No, you're like, oh, no, wasn't happening. Not in my home, not with my dad, not if I want to continue breathing. We don't even fathom expressing our feelings. But it's only energy. It's only energy. What's the real harm? Again, it's all the confused and distorted thinking that says, if you don't stop yelling at me, you're never going to hold a job. It's going to mean I'm a bad parent. You're going to die. I'm going to die. Don't yell at me. Don't yell at me. Don't yell at me. So we learn that attitudes are not okay. Then we learn that feelings are not okay. If you can't express through your attitudes, you can't express through your feelings, you go to behaviors. How many of you as kids could freely kick holes in the wall? Knock the mug of hot cocoa off the table against the wall. No. Not if you wanted to continue to breathe. So you didn't. But you had other behaviors. And the reason you had other behaviors is because if you can't express through your attitudes, you can't express through your feelings, and you can't express through your behaviors, you only have two options, and that's anger and depression. Anger and depression become your only two outlets. Anger and depression have to come out through behavior. So maybe you didn't slam the mug of hot cocoa against the wall, and maybe you didn't kick holes in the wall, but what did you do? Did you go to your room and spend long periods of time in your room by yourself? Did you stay out of the house for long periods of time? Did you have other friends? You went out and you drank beer and you smoked cigarettes and you had sex? What did you do? Were you just angry and you beat up other kids? Did you kill animals? Did you set fires? What'd you do? Did you just lie? Or did you just study and were just a picture of perfection? What did you do? Because if you can't express through your attitudes and you can't express through your feelings, you really only have your behaviors, anger, and depression. Those are your only options. Those are your only options. So now, we get our children and they have attitudes and we don't like attitudes. They express their feelings and we don't like their feelings. And then they drop down to behaviors. And guess what we do? We diagnose and medicate. If you spent more than 6 months at the level of anger and depression and behaviors, if you spent more than 6 months at that level of fear and stress, that is trauma. You are living in a state of trauma. And that state of trauma is where you get diagnosis. It's where you get medication. It's where you get residential treatment. It's where you get lots and lots of therapy. It's where you get disrupted placements. It's that level. Now, what's the answer to this puzzle? It's really not that complicated. The answer to the puzzle is you have to make it okay for your children to express their attitudes and their feelings. In fact, you want to celebrate eye rolling. You want to celebrate huffing and puffing. You want to celebrate getting cussed out. Because if you are getting cussed out, that means you are not getting hit in the nose. And I'd much rather be cussed out than hit in this beautiful face of mine. Which do you prefer? See, now you got to come. There's a reckoning that has to happen. There's a reckoning that has to happen when your child is experiencing attitudes. You take your child home from all this great treatment they've been getting, and you've been participating in all this great treatment, and you take them home, and the first day you ask them to take out the trash, and they go, What are you going to do? Because whatever you do is going to dictate the road you travel. You're going to make that attitude okay, or you're going to make it not okay. You're going to meet that attitude with some love and some understanding and some support. I know, taking out the trash sucks. I used to hate taking out the trash as a kid. You know what? Let's take it out together. Or you're going to meet it with some fear and stress and punishment. You've just been in residential for 6 months, and I come home, and I ask you to take out the trash, and you give me all this attitude. You didn't learn anything, and I spent all my money. What good was all of it? You will be right back here in 6 more months. What are you going to do different? Because what it's going to do is it's going to challenge all those messages. As soon as your child rolls your eyes, you are at risk for being, in our society, a bad parent. As soon as your child rolls their eyes at you, you are at risk of going against everything that mom and dad said that was right, that you shouldn't do. What are you going to do? Yes, ma'am.
So I'm assuming there's a lot of compromising going on here. That it's okay for my children to express their feelings in an angrily way, and for me not to get angry back at them, to engage in their behaviors. So are you saying that, we have to sit back, chill, and let them angrily express how they're feeling? Like, we need to acknowledge their feelings, and without us getting that stressed out and engaging back into their behaviors.
And engaging you back into your old behaviors. So it's more than just sitting back and chilling.
So it's compromising?
It's engaging. It's being present. When my child is yelling at me for whatever number of reasons, cursing or whatever, it's looking first at me and calming myself down, because there's no way on God's green earth would my father have permitted me to do that. And there is an imprint, there is a blueprint in my brain that makes me want to reach out and throttle you. There is an urge deep within me. So I'm looking at that and I'm settling that down, because I'm realizing in this moment, I am not at risk. See, that's all it becomes. Your brain in that moment is telling you you're at risk. Your amygdala is saying you're at risk right now. She's talking to you this way. There's something wrong. Something's going to go wrong. Do something about it. Fix it, fix it, fix it. I have to be able to say, calm down, calm down. And then I say to you, I hear you, you're mad. Well, tell me some more. What else are you mad at me about? I've been pretty crappy. Tell me some more. See, I have to be able to engage you at a level that says, I am really listening. I'm not just practicing a tool or a technique. I'm really listening, and you aren't at risk. Because what I want you to do is I want you to have the experience that you can have a lot of emotion and a lot of feeling with me, and you're not at risk. Different, fundamentally different than what we experienced as kids. I did not experience that I could have a lot of feelings and not be at risk. I want my child to experience that they can have a lot of feelings and not be at risk. And so far, they haven't had that experience. And depending on what their history is, it could have been even more intense. They could have had, they could have been beaten when they cried as infants. We don't know what that has been. So here's the thing. I've got to be able to work with you. So right now, you have children who are, for the most part, conditioned for behaviors. That's their only option. We haven't given them an opportunity to express their attitudes. We haven't given them an opportunity to express their feelings. So they're conditioned for behavior. So that's what they do. They act out. They're supposed to act out. You know why? Because we haven't taught them anything else. We've just been telling them, stop doing that, stop doing that, stop doing that. But we haven't taught them anything else. What we've taught them is how to be out of control. Because if they keep doing it, then we get out of control. So they haven't learned anything else. They've learned how to get punished for their behavior. They've learned how to get consequences for their behavior. They've learned how to get spanked for their behavior. But they haven't been taught any different behavior. So that's why they have the behaviors that they do. So what we want to do is we want to listen to our children when they're giving us signals that lead to those behaviors. And we want to start making those signals okay instead of pushing them further down that line. Further down that trail is what we typically do. When they give us an attitude, we get all upset and frustrated, and then that creates stress. And then they backtalk us, and then that creates more stress. And before you know it, they've ran away. Or we're fighting, or they've broken something.
What I do myself that seems to work really well is if I can see a child really upset, even my own kids, is I look at, is they're in a lot of pain? And then I practice empathy. So when I practice empathy and look at that person in pain, then I'm not getting threatened or stressed because just like if my child broke his arm, okay? If he broke his arm, he's in a lot of pain. My automatic response is empathy. I want to help you.
Yeah.
I understand how painful it is to break your arm. So when I see my child in a state of stress and they're very angry, I think inside of myself, if I'm that way, I'm experiencing a lot of pain. And if you look at it from an empathy standpoint, then you don't have to own their stress, and then you can reach out in an empathetic way without getting stressed yourself and without getting involved in their pain. So you don't have to own their pain because you're looking at, boy, if I felt that way, if I felt that stressed out and I was expressing myself, I'd be in a lot of pain. So then I don't have to internalize
Take it personal.
And get personal about it. So you're saying, you're thinking in your mind, oh, well, you know, if I was that upset, it would really bother me. So with empathy, you can reach out, just like you reach out when somebody has a broken arm.
How long has it taken you to get to that point?
You know, I figured that out about 5-7 years ago.
Yeah, okay.
But because empathy is really powerful.
Absolutely.
And it does not activate the amygdala.
Yeah, you're absolutely
It
right.
shuts that down, and it creates the, what, oxytocin?
Oxytocin.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
very good point.
And it's very powerful to work that way. I'm not trying to own their pain.
And I 100% agree with you, and I call that seeing their fear.
Yeah.
Looking through a different lens. And I have said, and maybe one day I'll do this, I want to have some glasses created, some little sunglasses created that in them have a little hologram of an infant. So when you look at someone, what you see is the infant inside of them. Because when your children are acting out, when they're at their worst, whether they are 5, 10, 15, or 20, whether it is your 50-year-old husband, we are just babies. We're just babies who've been hurt, and when we can see the fear and have empathy, then we don't feel so threatened and reactive. But it is a process, and now transition the best you can. Have you close that door? Okay, we're going to start back. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about this bowl first. This bowl has two purposes. Number one, it lets you know when we're going to start back after a break. But second, and more important, it is a cue to take 3 deep breaths. So when you hear the bell ring, you take 3 deep breaths, inhaling through your nose, exhaling out of your mouth. And let me tell you why that's significant. Breathing is the single most important way to calm our stress physiology. So when we become stressed, the single most effective way to calm that stress is through breathing. However, the first thing we do when we become stressed is we stop breathing. We start holding our breath and we start taking very short, ineffective breaths. But here's the thing. If you can learn to breathe in the midst of stress, you can learn to master any relationship that you are in. Any relationship. Because when you can learn to breathe in the midst of stress, then you have just mastered your ability to not allow your cortisol to overwhelm your brain. And when you breathe, you automatically turn on your oxytocin response. One of the reasons breathing feels so good to the body is not only is it flooding the cells with oxygen and allowing them to open more fully, but it is turning on oxytocin in your brain. When you are stressed and you are holding your breath, your cells are constricted. The longer your cells are constricted, the more likely they are to start to release poison in your body, carbon dioxide. So as you hold your breath and as you start taking very short, ineffective breaths, you're actually poisoning your body. The moment you start to breathe, you start to restore life to your body, allowing your cells to open up. So truly, if there was only one thing that I could teach you all day long, I believe the most important thing would be how to breathe when you become stressed. And you have to practice it, not when you're stressed, but practice it when you're calm. Because as you practice it when you're calm, your brain starts to remember. You practice your breathing sitting here. You practice your breathing at lunch. You practice your breathing when you're driving. You practice your breathing when you go back to your hotel room or wherever it is you're staying. You practice then. You practice when you're standing in line at lunch. You just stop and breathe. One of the things we oftentimes do is we talk far too much. We want to talk and talk and talk and talk. But talking is a function of your left hemisphere, which is your thinking, your rationalizing hemisphere. Breathing and listening is a function of your right hemisphere, which is your emotional hemisphere. Every challenge you have with your child, every challenge you have with some other adult is a function of your right hemisphere. And your right hemisphere dictates to your left hemisphere. So let's just take some time and let's breathe. It's talking about children, but that when we are stressed, we regress. One of the things Bruce Perry says is in times of stress, we regress to our developmental zone of comfort. So all you have to know is when we stress, we regress. So you may have a 15-year-old, your husband may be 40 years old, but when he's upset and stressed out, he's not 40 anymore. He's 13, or he's 5, or he's 2, or he's sometimes even an infant. And now there's research that says that some adults have the ability in stress to revert to infancy. Well, we know that, right? Stop acting like a baby, act your age, not your shoe size. Well, that is a neurophysiologic reality. When we regress, we go back to much younger ages. So it's not about, there's three ages. There's chronological, there's cognitive, and there's emotional. Chronological is how old you are. Cognitive is how smart you are. Emotional is what your emotional maturity, your emotional age is. And that varies depending on stress. But your emotional dictates your chronological and your cognitive. If you've ever noticed that when your kids are actually in the most regulated state, and that's when they're the calmest, that's when they're also the smartest and they're the most mature. It's when they're stressed out that they act like 5-year-olds or angry 2-year-olds, and they're not using their brain. So that video speaks a lot about young children. But I even have therapists, when I show therapists that video, I have them insert themselves where they're saying young children. Because it's the same for us as therapists, it's the same for us as parents. I mean, we're all just people. I don't make any separation. You don't have to call me a therapist, you don't have to call me a parent, I'm just a human being. And that's what we all are, and we're just all trying to figure this out. So when you take that times 2, because your question was, with 2 teenagers, one of the things I want you to look at a really basic level is that you've got 2 teenagers, and both, when stressed, go into survival. When they go into survival, they look to you fundamentally as the person to keep them safe. Now, what happens in their state of survival, this is where you get sibling rivalry. They look at each other as a threat to their survival. Because one sibling has the ability to take mom away from me. So that's why sibling rivalry can oftentimes be so intense. Because it is literally a fight for survival. One sibling looks at the other sibling as literally having the ability to bring about their death. And so it's so intense in that way. And if you struggle with sibling rivalry with your kids, one of the most powerful things you can say to them is you stop them. You know, when you get in the middle of their fighting, you look at both of them and you say, I am not going to let you die. And you use those very specific words because that is the unconscious experience. It is not a conscious experience. You say, I'm not going to let you die. There's enough of me to go around for all of you. So here's what I want to do something real quick. Take you through a little exercise because Daniel Siegel, who's also written a very good book called Parenting from the Inside Out, if you ever have an opportunity to read that. Bruce Perry has a couple of books out. His first one was the Boy Raised as a Dog or something of that one. And then another one he just wrote a few years ago was talking about love. And I haven't even read it. But Parenting from the Inside Out by Daniel Siegel is very good. But he was mentioning on the video, one of the first things parents can do is have self-understanding. Well, what does that look like? How do you start that process? So I want to do a little exercise just to give you an experience of what that can look like.